Welcome back to Morning Live. Now, as mentioned earlier on this morning, the Proteas have secured their spot in the semi-finals of the T20 World Cup after beating the co-hosts West Indies by 3 wickets out in Antigua with 5 balls to spare. Joining us now via Zoom is News 24 sports journalist Khanyiso Tshwaku to review South Africa's performance so far out at the T20 World Cup. Good morning to you, Khanyiso. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Vian. Good morning to the viewers.
I want to first start and talk about our bowling attack from the South Africa side, managing to limit the West Indies to 135 in their 20 overs. And I want to highlight the likes of Shamsi, who was eventually the player of the match in this one, as well as Keshav Maharaj, our spinners having done so well. What do you make of how we've come out in terms of our bowling attack at this World Cup?
Firstly, thinking on their feet, Aiden Markram opened the bowling, bowled a 4-over spell, spin bowled 12 of the 20 overs. The big difference is that South Africa were able to coax 57 dot balls from the West Indies inning. That's 9.3 overs of runs not being scored. Despite the 81 run partnership between Kyle Mayers and Roston Chase, that meant the West Indies pretty much could not get going. They were unable to rotate the strike. And that's pretty much where the game was won. Yes, the chase was shaky. I mean, it is a pressure game, South Africa, and pressure games on the best of bedfellows. But the fact remained that it was this bowling and the spinners come won the game. I mean, if you look at 12 overs of spin, none of them going for more than 30 for 30 in that 4-over spell. I mean, Tabrai Shams was magnificent with his 3 for 27. Effectively, it was the bowling that won the game. And I think, again, the equalizing in the conditions, especially in the West Indies, where you get services like St. Lucia that are quite amenable to batting, but then when you go to Antigua and when you go to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you get totally different conditions. But I think, again, South Africa thought on their feet with the bowling. I mean, again, the batting left a lot to be desired, but I think with the kind of foul luck South Africa's had at tournaments, how they won now, it doesn't matter. Just that they just didn't rock up. And I mean, they've now done 7 from 7. Now that they've qualified for the semi-finals, it's anything goes.
It is anything goes, but something that you touch on is how the batting hasn't lived up to the expected standards. Let's go a little bit deeper into that, because you have one of our openers in Reza Hendricks not quite batting the way we expected him to so far in this World Cup, as well as our captain, Aiden Markram. But I mean, you have to commend Markram in terms of the decisions he's able to make out on the field. But let's speak to the batting of the South African side.
Look, it's been a tough ask for batters. I mean, when you look at the tournament itself, South Africa only have had really one really good batting surface to deal with, and that was St. Lucia when they played. It was other team again with the USA. It's probably the only time where the batters really got stuck in. I mean, if you look back at it was Barbados, Barbados in Antigua. When you look back at the England game in an example, South Africa used the batting conditions as best as they could before the pitch slowed down. Again, the bowlers did the job, even though there was a 3-over spell where England scored 52 and nearly actually got themselves back in the game. But just across the board, it hasn't been an easy it hasn't been an easy tournament for batters in particular. One would have thought that with the move to the West Indies, things could have been easier. Yes, we've seen scores of 160, 170, 180, which are par for the course in the World Cup. But South Africa, yes, Reza said his batting struggles. I think everyone in the top 6 has had an off game. I mean, David Miller, for example, had an off game today. Heinrich Klaasen also had an off game. But remember that Klaasen also had a starting game in those tough pitches in New York. So every so often, a batter has chipped in. Even Reza, yes, the tournament has been difficult for him. But remember now, outside of his 40 that he made against Nepal in Arnold's Vale, South Africa would have lost that game. So there haven't been consistent contributions, yes. But at every juncture, there has been someone who's actually raised his hand. Today was just a collective effort from everyone, whereas in other games, it's always been one score that's been the difference that's allowed the team to progress.
And speaking of that collective effort from the entire team, I mean, we saw Khanyiso Rabada eventually coming in, and we all know that he's not the strongest batter, but he did get what was a beautiful boundary when we needed it the most. Let's speak about Khanyiso Rabada in terms of what he's done out at this World Cup, particularly in the bowling. Despite the statements made by Dale Steyn over the weekend, he is one of our key players in this tournament.
No, it is. I mean, the thing with Khanyiso Rabada is that sometimes his body language can be deceiving. When he's generally fired up, he's a very intense bowler. And then reading body language is very, for some it's easy, for some it's difficult. But he's been a very good contributor. I mean, if you look back at what happened in the England game where he conceded 18 in an over, which actually then allowed England to fight back in the game. He then came back at the back end and bowled a magnificent 19th over that actually pretty much won the game. So in a lot of games, Khanyiso, yes, may have gone for runs, but he's also been taking wickets. But when he's been all called upon to actually deliver with the ball, he's actually delivered. So I think the fact that, again, when you look at the bowling, it's been a collective effort, but there've also been individual efforts. I mean, Khanyiso's bowled well in the tournament. I mean, Marco Jansen has been magnificent with the ball. Anders Nokia, when called upon, it's also pulled up, it's also pulled in with these performances. I mean, there's nothing more you can say about the spinners. To Brace has come up trumps, especially in the West Indies. Keshav has been magnificent throughout the tournament. Aiden, his arm loading today was superb. But KG, the less we read into his body language and the more we look into what he does with ball in hand, especially with how well he read the conditions today, because at times you felt that he'd use up and over to read conditions and then fight back well towards the back end of his spell. I think in today's game, he read the conditions well very early and bowled magnificently.
Indeed, he did. And unfortunately, Khanyiso, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Always a pleasure chatting to you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, now we definitely know that despite who South Africa faces in the semi-finals, one thing we know for certain is that we need to secure a victory to move on into the final. We've seen some frailties with the Australian team losing out to Afghanistan. There's an India team that has been solid so far in this World Cup. Well, we'll see what comes next for South Africa's Proteas.